For today's video, we are going to be going over the best active NHL player from each draft pick. Obviously, just doing the first round, so picks 1 through 32. If we did all 7 rounds, this video would be multiple hours long, but hey, if that's something you guys want to see in the future, let me know. Before we get started, I do want to mention that this list is made up of the best players right now in 2024, so it's largely based off of this past season, so be sure to keep that in mind while watching. And if this is your first time checking out the channel and you want more NHL content just like this all year round, be sure to hit that subscribe button. So with that all being said, let's go ahead and start off the video with pick 32. And I'm kind of cheating here already because pick 32 has only been in the first round for 3 drafts since Seattle has came into the league, and the 3 players selected 32nd overall over the last 3 drafts, Nolan Allen, Reed Schaefer, and David Edstrom, none of them have played in the NHL yet. So we're going to go back to when 32nd overall was not a first round draft pick, and my pick for the best active 32nd overall pick is Mattias Samuelsson, who has turned into a pretty reliable top 4 shutdown defenseman for the Buffalo Sabres. Moving on now to pick 31, similar to pick 32, 31 hasn't been a first round draft pick for that long, only since 2017 when Vegas came into the league, and since 2017, the only 31st overall pick that's became an NHL regular is Klim Kostin, who was taken 31st overall by the Blues back in 2017, so we're going to cheat a little bit here again. We're going all the way back to the 2008 NHL draft when the Florida Panthers selected goaltender Jacob Markstrom with the 32nd overall pick. Markstrom is a little bit of a late bloomer, took him a while to become a full-time starter at the NHL level, but once he did back in 2017 with the Vancouver Canucks, he never looked back. And over these past 7 seasons, with the exception of maybe 1 or 2 mediocre years, Jacob Markstrom for the most part has consistently been a very good starting goaltender. Some decent options for pick number 30. Recently, you got guys like Joe Veleno and Eeli Tolvanen, and then back in the early 2010s, you got Ryan Hartman, Tanner Pearson, Rickard Rakell. But my pick for the best player currently who is selected 30th overall is Brock Nelson of the New York Islanders, who in my opinion is one of the more underrated goal scorers of the past decade. He scored 20 plus in a season 8 times throughout his career and seems to just get better with age. He scored 34 goals this past season in 82 games, which was his 3rd consecutive 30 plus goal season. Moving on now to pick number 29, it has to be Adrian Kempe of the Los Angeles Kings. Other notables include guys like Jason Dickinson, Rasmus Sandin, and Trent Frederick. However, none of those guys are really much of a threat to Adrian Kempe for this spot. Over these last 3 seasons, Kempe has really blossomed into a legit top-line forward for the Los Angeles Kings. He led the Kings in scoring this past season with a career-high 75 points in 77 games, and this is following a year in which he scored a career-high 41 goals in 82 games. My pick for the best current NHL player drafted 28th overall is going to be Charlie Coyle of the Boston Bruins. I will give an honorable mention to Corey Perry, who would get this spot if it was, say, 10 years ago, but right now in 2024, it's got to be Charlie Coyle, who's coming off of a season in which he put up career highs in both goals with 25 and points with 60. Moving on now to pick number 27. This one is easy. It is John Carlson of the Washington Capitals. He really doesn't have any competition for this spot. At 34 years old, John Carlson is still an elite offensive defenseman, one of the best power play quarterbacks in the league. Pick number 26 was kind of a tough one. A lot of talent drafted at this position over the years. I'll give honorable mentions to guys like Shea Theodore and Tage Thompson especially, but I decided to go with Jake Ottinger, goaltender for the Dallas Stars. My reasoning for that, Tage Thompson had a down year. Shea Theodore missed almost half the year with an injury, so that's kind of why I defaulted to Jake Ottinger, who I guess in his own right kind of had a down year compared to his first few seasons in the league, but still managed to finish tied for 6th in the league in wins in the regular season with 35. Pick number 25 is a no-brainer. It is David Pastrnak of the Boston Bruins, not only the best active NHL player who was selected 25th overall, I think probably the best 25th overall pick of all time. David Pastrnak has now had back-to-back 110 plus point seasons. He's been in the conversation for best winger in the entire league for like 6 seasons now. I think you probably still give the edge to somebody like Kucherov, but Pasternak's definitely in that conversation. Moving on now to pick number 24, big honorable mention to Jared McCann of the Seattle Kraken. I think you can definitely make a strong argument for him, but I decided to go with Travis Konechny, who is one of the many players drafted in 2015 that are going to be featured in this video. Travis Konechny really is the heart and soul of that Philadelphia Flyers team. He is a dynamic offensive player that plays with a lot of bite as well, always seems to be giving it 110% out there. He's now led the Flyers in scoring for 3 straight years, and this past season he actually put up career highs in both goals with 33 and points with 68. Probably going to get a lot of people disagreeing with my pick for number 23. I decided to go with Wyatt Johnston of the Dallas Stars, but definitely massive honorable mention to Brock Besser, who had a career year. Sure, he outscored Wyatt Johnston this season, but not by a whole lot. Johnston still finished with 32 goals and 65 points compared to Besser's 40 goals and 73 points. And Johnston is one of those guys who really impacts the game in a lot of other areas. At just 21 years old, already such a well-rounded 200-foot player, so that's why I decided to give him the edge over Brock Besser. Moving on now to pick number 22, a couple of honorable mentions to guys like Keandre Miller and Jordan Eberle, but I think my pick definitely has to be Claude Giroux of the Ottawa Senators. He was selected 22nd overall by the Philadelphia Flyers in 2006. At 36 years old, Claude Giroux is still a very effective top-line forward and overall has been a fantastic signing so far for the Ottawa Senators. Next up, we have pick 21, which would probably go to a guy like Philip Hedl had he not missed almost the entirety of this past season with an injury, so by default, I think it has to be Robbie Fabry of the Detroit Red Wings. The St. Louis Blues 21st overall pick back in 2014 has struggled to stay healthy throughout his tenure with the Wings so far, but still has managed to score at a 20-plus goal pace in each of the 5 seasons he spent with them. Moving on now to pick number 20, and this was a really tough one for me. Went back and forth here a couple of times. In the end, decided to go with Joel Eriksson-Ek of the Minnesota Wild, but have to give a massive honorable mention to Robert Thomas, who is one of the better playmaking centermen in the NHL, is coming off of a career year in which he put up 86 points. If you think this spot should go to Robert Thomas, I'm really not going to argue with you, but I decided to give the edge to Eriksson-Ek, who had a career year offensively with 30 goals and 64 points, while also being one of the best defensive centermen in the entire NHL. Such a complete player. I think he's one of the best two-way forwards in the league. Next up at pick number 19, I decided to go with Chris Kreider, but definitely big honorable mention to Andrei Vasilevskiy. That's why I mentioned at the start of this video, this is not who's had the better career, it's who's the best right now. And Andrei Vasilevskiy is coming off of probably the worst season of his career, so that's why I decided to give someone like Chris Kreider the edge. Over these last 3 seasons, Chris Kreider has been one of the more efficient goal scorers in the entire league. He can hurt you in so many different ways. He's a fantastic skater with a lethal shot, so he's effective off the rush, plays the net front role on the power play as good as anybody in the NHL, and I think he has an underrated two-way game as well. Overall, just a beast of a top 6 winger. Next up, for the best NHL player selected 18th overall, I decided to go with Thomas Harley, who was selected 18th by the Dallas Stars in 2019. Honorable mention to someone like Thomas Chabot, but he missed a large portion of this past season, and Thomas Harley really had a big breakthrough year, so I think he edges Thomas Chabot out here. Harley finished this past season scoring 15 goals and putting up 47 points in 79 games, played decent defensively, and really just was the perfect partner for Miro Heiskanen. Moving on now to pick number 17. This one's a no-brainer. It's got to be Kyle Connor of the Winnipeg Jets. The only person that I guess you could consider competition for this spot is Thomas Hertl, but I think Kyle Connor is the clear-cut answer here. He's one of the best goal-scoring wingers in the NHL, scored 34 goals this past season in just 65 games, the 6th time out of his 7 full seasons he's spent in the NHL where he scored 30+. For pick number 16, I will give an honorable mention to Jacob Chychrun of the Ottawa Senators, but I think the answer definitely has to be Matt Barzal of the New York Islanders, yet another player on this list who was selected in 2015. He's one of the best skaters in the entire NHL, a dynamic playmaker who is coming off a really strong season. He hit the 80-point mark for the first time since his rookie year. I think the Islanders really have something good on that top line with Bo Horvat and Barzal playing together. They just gotta find those guys a third line mate. Moving on now to 15th overall, my pick is definitely JT Miller of the Vancouver Canucks, who had a career year this season, 37 goals, 103 points, the first time in his career he's broken the 100-point mark. Since Rick Tocchet took over as Canucks head coach, JT Miller really has just taken his game to a whole other level, not just offensively, but he's improved in a lot of other different areas as well. Rick Tocchet coming in is really the best thing that ever could have possibly happened to JT Miller in his tenure with the Vancouver Canucks. Moving on now to pick number 14. This is an obvious one. It's got to be Charlie Coyle of the Boston Bruins, their 14th overall selection from the 2016 draft. In my opinion, one of the best and most complete defensemen in the NHL today, just really doesn't have any flaws in his game. Next up, my pick for the 13th spot is going to be Nick Suzuki of the Montreal Canadiens. Definitely have to give an honorable mention to Josh Morrissey. Kind of hard to compare a number 1 center to a number 1 defenseman. I definitely think you can make the case for both, but I decided to give the edge to Nick Suzuki, who I think really stepped up this past season and had the best year of his career. Moving on now to pick number 12. Some really solid options here. Honorable mention to guys like Martin Necas and Matt Boldy, but I decided to go with Noah Dobson, defenseman for the New York Islanders, their 12th overall selection from 2018. Over these last 3 seasons, Noah Dobson really has broken out and established himself as one of the best offensive defensemen in the league. A career high 70 points this past season. Only defenseman in the NHL with more points than Noah Dobson in the regular season. Adam Fox, Victor Hedman, Evan Bouchard, Roman Josi, Cale Makar, and Quinn Hughes. That is some elite company. My pick for the best active NHLer, who was selected 11th overall, is definitely got to be Philip Forsberg. Honorable mention to Anze Kopitar, but I think Philip Forsberg definitely definitely edges him out in 2024. Forsberg is coming off of a career year. I think he was one of the more underrated players in the entire league this past season. 48 goals, 94 points in 82 games. An absolute powerhouse offensively, who I think plays an underrated 200-foot game as well. Overall, just one of the more fun, crafty players to watch in the entire league. Getting into the top 10 now, probably won't do as many honorable mentions just because there's so many, but my pick for the best player drafted 10th overall currently is definitely Mikko Rantanen of the Colorado Avalanche. One of the best wingers in the entire league, has scored 100 or more points now in each of the past 2 seasons, a bona fide superstar who elevates his game in the playoffs. In terms of players who have put up 50 or more points in their playoff career, Mikko Rantanen is 8th all time in playoff points per game. Next up, my pick for the best current player drafted 9th overall is going to be Bo Horvat of the New York Islanders. Struggled a little bit with the Islanders last season after coming over in that trade from Vancouver, but really found his footing with them this season. Finished with 33 goals and 68 points, and again really developed some nice chemistry with Matt Barzal on that Islanders top line. Moving on now to pick number 8, I'm going with William Nylander of the Toronto Maple Leafs, who had a fantastic season, scored 40 goals for the second consecutive year, was just 2 points shy of the 100-point mark, put up a career high 98 points. Definitely earned himself quite a bit more money with the way he performed during the first half of the season before signing that massive extension. Next up, my pick for the best current player drafted 7th overall has got to be Quinn Hughes of the Vancouver Canucks, who I think is going to end up winning the 2024 Norris Trophy. An unbelievable year for Quinn Hughes, career highs across the board offensively with 17 goals and 75 assists for 92 points. Took his defensive game to another level as well, really established himself as one of the absolute best defensemen in the entire NHL this season. Moving on now to pick number 6, my pick has got to be Filip Zadina. I wish it worked out in Detroit, unfortunately it didn't, but since moving to San Jose, his career has really taken off. Now I'm just messing around. It's Matthew Tkachuk, who was selected 6th overall by the Calgary Flames in 2016. One of the best wingers in the entire NHL, 40 plus goals and 100 plus points in 2 out of the last 3 seasons. He's been crucial for the Florida Panthers, making back-to-back Stanley Cup Finals over these last 2 postseasons. In 42 games, he's got 46 points. Love him or hate him. If you're an Oilers fan, you probably hate him, but the dude's an absolute beast. Moving on now to pick number 5. This is an easy one. It's got to be Elias Pettersson of the Vancouver Canucks, who has been well over a point per game in each of the past 2 seasons. In my opinion, one of the more complete centermen in the entire NHL, effective in all areas, plays for the Canucks on both special teams, a superstar in every sense of the word. Moving on now to the best player at pick number 4, I am definitely going with Cale Makar of the Colorado Avalanche. I said that I think Quinn Hughes probably wins the Norris in 2024, and I think rightfully so. He had a fantastic year, but if I'm picking a defenseman to start my franchise with, I am going with Cale Makar. In my opinion, he's the best defenseman in the league. At just 25 years old, he's already accomplished so much. He's the Avalanche franchise leader in both goals and points by defensemen. He was the second fastest defenseman in NHL history to reach 300 career points. The only defenseman to do it quicker was Bobby Orr. He's a Calder Trophy winner, a Stanley Cup champion, Conn Smythe winner, Norris Trophy winner. In my opinion, a generational talent, and I think when it's all said and done, Cale Makar is going to be looked at as one of the greatest defensemen of all time. My pick for the best current NHL player drafted 3rd overall is another no-brainer. It's got to be Leon Draisaitl of the Edmonton Oilers. 100 or more points in 5 of the past 6 seasons. He won the Art Ross, the Hart, and the Ted Lindsay back in 2020, and I know he's catching a bit of heat right now for not having a goal yet throughout the Stanley Cup Finals, but in terms of points per game, Leon Draisaitl is one of the greatest playoff performers of all time. Moving on now to the 2nd overall draft pick, obviously a ton of amazing options here. Honorable mentions to guys like Jack Eichel, Sam Reinhart, Victor Hedman, Drew Doughty, but my pick for the best player currently selected 2nd overall is going to be Alexander Barkov of the Florida Panthers, who I think will likely end up winning his 2nd Selke Trophy this year. There's not an area of the game that Alexander Barkov is not a lead at. One of the best and most complete players in the entire league, just an absolute beast in every area. And now finally, finishing out the video with the best player selected 1st overall, not even going to bother giving out any honorable mentions, it is Connor McDavid. I don't need to sit here and bore you by reading off all of Connor McDavid's accolades. The dude is already one of the greatest players in NHL history at just 27 years old. If he retired today, already a first ballot Hall of Famer. It seems like just when you think you've seen the best from Connor McDavid, he is able to take his game to another level. He's had back-to-back 4-point games in the Stanley Cup Finals, is absolutely shattering records throughout this Oilers playoff run. At this point, I'm pretty confident that Connor McDavid is going to win the Conn Smythe Trophy as playoffs MVP, even if the Oilers lose in the Stanley Cup Finals and aren't able to pull off this 3-0 comeback. This would mean that Connor McDavid is the first skater in NHL history to win the Conn Smythe on the losing team. It really is just an absolute privilege to be able to watch this guy play. So that is going to wrap up today's video, going over the best NHL player today in 2024 drafted at each draft position in the first round. As always, I want to know what you guys are thinking, so if you disagree with any of my picks, be sure to let me know what your list would look like down below in the comments. If you got all the way to the end of the video and you ended up enjoying yourself, please remember to leave it a like. It's the best way to let me know that you enjoyed, and it does help out the videos a ton. And most importantly, if this was your first time checking out the channel and you want more NHL content just like this all year round, be sure to hit that subscribe button, and I will talk to you all again soon.